lessons for the news literacy class we're going to teach in the fall.
And I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Why are journalists important?
I'm researching that right now. I think what I'm going to want to communicate is that a journalist can sort through information to determine its value and its reliability before they pass it on to the public. That's an important concept. Journalists have to seek truth, they have to verify information before they use it. Journalists consider the validity of their sources, and are their sources self-interested? In other words, will their source benefit from the outcome of the story? If that's the case, then the journalist needs to communicate that in the story. The journalist also needs to communicate sometimes if they can't get to a source and why that was. This is called transparency, in which the journalist reveals information, and they also reveal the lack of information and the reason for that lack of information. Why couldn't it be obtained?
What is the best type of source journalists can use?
Well, that's a good question. The best facts, I think, that journalists use are direct evidence, an actual observation, an eyewitness, an authoritative source. In other words, a source who is credible, such as a public official, law enforcement, or an expert in the field. Somebody that probably doesn't have self-interest in the story, somebody that is authoritative. That's probably the best source a journalist can use.
Yeah, that makes sense. But sometimes I see stories that only show one side. What are you going to tell kids about that?
Yeah, that's a good one. What I'd like to tell kids is they're looking for a balance. In some cases, journalists show a limited perspective. What we need to have students look for is that the journalists are showing an independent, story, that they're representing all sides. Sometimes you see that type of one-sided reporting on those cable news shows where there's yelling. They're entertaining, but they don't always represent, a balanced picture of the story. I like to tell students to keep a mental scorecard. When they're looking at a story, start to just balance, I'm seeing this perspective, now I'm seeing another perspective. And at the end of the story, take a look at that mental scorecard. Is it skewed? Were the perspectives represented in a balanced manner? If they weren't, then they need to maybe look for another source of that story. What I really want kids to do is, I want them to think critically.
So if you had to sum it up, what is the one thing you want your kids to walk away with?
I guess I want my kids to walk away knowing that journalists work for them, that they don't work for some corporation, that they work for the public good. I want my students to expect journalists to work that way, that when they sense that there's an ulterior motive, that there's a bias, that there's one side to the story, that the perspective isn't balanced, that's critical thinking, and that's a good news consumer. And that's what I want kids to know.
Thanks for the info.
Thanks for asking.